Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I promised during my FarCry Primal WTF Is that I would give you another look at the game once the title had actually come out and there were game-ready drivers available. So, this is a performance assessment of the game with the Day 1 patch and the 3.2.2.0 GeForce game-ready drivers, which are supposedly designed for Far Cry Primal. Guess who wasn't impressed? Me, sir! So this is a benchmark at 1080p, running SMAA, anti-aliasing, and ultra presets. Frame rate increase? Not really. Couple extra frames at most. You can see the CPU and GPU usage over to the side right there. And I will note that I'm using Shadowplay to capture this in order to get best performance so that it doesn't impact the frame rate itself. So it's going to be maybe slightly blurrier than usual, but hey, it's Far Cry Primal, it's going to be super blurry anyway, right? This is not all that impressive, I have to say. You got the minimum FPS there at 54. The rest of it, for the most part, stays above 60. But as I mentioned, that's with AA off. What happens if we turn AA on? Well, honestly, not a huge amount. Now, what happens if we turn AA off? Will that help at all? The answer is, unfortunately, not a great deal. I'll speed this up towards the end, but as you'll notice on the end stat screen, we had a gain of about 2 or 3 frames per second. This is on a single Titan X, not 2, 1. And my usual setup, which you can find, if you wish, in the About page of my YouTube channel. Not all that impressed. Interesting thing that I'm noting, by the way, that CPU 2 is working really, really hard, and actually on some presets it's actually maxing CPU 2, but it isn't really spreading the load all that well out over the other cores. Could that have something to do with it? I don't really know. I'm curious to see just how clock speed is tied to performance in this game. Hard to say. Alright, let's bench it on low, shall we? So, SMAA on or low? That's a really poor gain. Have you noticed that? Yes, it's a gain, but at low detail I would expect a great deal more, and you're probably noticing a huge amount of pop-in and LOD issues and artifacts all over the place in this mode, and obviously the shadows suck a lot more and all that sort of thing. Poor texture quality. Yeah, we can get a higher frame rate, but much, much lower than I personally would have expected from a card of this particular stature. Alright, what about 1440p? Well, performance at 1080p already hasn't been great, so you can probably imagine this isn't going to go that well. And it doesn't. We're looking at 45 frames per second at 1440p on a single Titan X. It, according to the MSI Afterburner stats in the corner, is working the GPU to the bone at this point. Although I have to say that the GPU readout for MSI Afterburner for the VRAM usage versus the VRAM usage that it indicates in-game is inconsistent. I'm not sure which of them is misreading, but yeah, that isn't brilliant. What about SLI? Well, this is where stuff gets really weird. It runs worse. You can clearly see it right here. Both GPU working about the same, which is an interesting amount of balance. And you're looking for a bottleneck here, and you're thinking, well, maybe it's that CPU 2, but I have tried turning CPU 2 off to see what would happen. Didn't help. This game is running worse with SLI on versus SLI off. I have no explanation for that at all. But that is broke. Alright, let's go over to my laptop and check how it runs there. Again, updated to the latest drivers, game ready. Quick specs for the laptop, i7-4800 at stock, 770M, and 16 gigs of RAM running Windows 7 64-bit. This is at the lowest resolution I could set it to, and the lowest detail presets I could set it to. The resolution this footage was captured at was 1360 by 768, so not quite 720p, but pretty close. Frame rate is the mid-40s. Not particularly impressive, and things are about to get a whole lot worse when we switch over to 1080p, bearing in mind we are still at lowest possible detail. Awful. Sub 30, around 25. I have noticed a small gain because the last time I benched it at 1080p on low, I was getting closer to lower 20s than upper, so there has been an increase, certainly, with the Day 1 patch and with the drivers, but otherwise, not good at all, essentially not really playable. I will note that the official Ubisoft blog says that the game is not actually designed for laptop versions of cards. It doesn't officially support them, but they may work. 770M is pretty common, pretty ubiquitous kind of card. It's over the minimum spec requirements for the game. It is under the recommended, which is a 780 or an R9 280X or equivalent. One way or the other, pretty poor performance across the board on the laptop. No real doubt about that. Okay, so what you're seeing here is some real-world performance. This is back at Ultra Settings 1080p on my regular desktop PC. This does drop below 60 in regular play, which is not particularly impressive at all, especially bearing in mind it is 1080p and not an Ultra HD or higher HD kind of resolution like 1440p. It's definitely concerning. I would certainly try to shave some settings off to get above 60. I wouldn't run it on low because, frankly, the game is hideous with the amount of pop-in when you run on low, but still, you probably want to see what you can do about getting a few extra frames out just to keep it above 60 for your gaming pleasure. We're going to jump right back to the hub area here, and this is, of course, where the benchmark was actually taken and where quite a lot of the footage from my previous video was taken, and you'll notice a fairly similar frame rate. There is, however, one thing that I wanted to test out, which is what is the effect of field of view on the actual frame rate? So this is at FOV 100, so around 65 to 70 FPS. Let's switch it over to a pretty low field of view, which would be 65. That's kind of console level field of view. What do you get? Higher 70s. So there's definitely a benefit to it, but less of a benefit than I would have necessarily expected. Plus, 65 field of view is vomit-inducing, and I wouldn't recommend it. We switch on right back to 100 field of view here. And you should see it go back down to the previous level of performance. But the weird thing is, it doesn't. Strange, isn't it? Not really sure exactly what the cause of that is, but now it's at about 75 while standing, whereas it was 65 before at the same 100, which is a fairly wide field of view. The performance sort of goes back down after a while, but it's just a curious little phenomenon. I'm not 100% sure what causes it. But there's definitely an effect, and I imagine if you're seeing people benching this game really, really high, they're probably running on a fairly low field of view, or they're missing an option or something like that. I don't really have any other explanation for the fact that some of these sites are claiming that the game runs really well. Like, I don't know how it's running that well on a 970 at the PC Gamer office, or how some of those forum posts are claiming post-100 benchmarks at high resolutions and high detail. I just don't understand that. But one way or the other, the improvements are marginal, and I'd still say that you might want to wait this game out. So one last little test for the sake of completeness. This is, of course, Far Cry 4, running at 2560-1440. Ultra settings across the board with all the NVIDIA-specific features enabled. This is me jumping off a cliff at the thought of playing another Far Cry game, but you get the idea. And it's running a hell of a lot better. Again, I said 2560-1440, not 1080p. The performance I'm actually getting here is equivalent to the 1080p performance of Primal. And honestly, does this game look that much worse? I mean, in many ways, it arguably looks better. It's using exactly the same engine. It has those nice NVIDIA-specific effects if you happen to have an NVIDIA card, and I do sympathize if you don't. But one way or the other, I'm just really confused as to where the performance went. I would, at this point, recommend avoiding Primal unless you're really not concerned all that much about performance until they resolve the issues with more patches and more driver support. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then by all means do feel free to click the like button. If you did not, then feel free to click the dislike. Just bear in mind, of course, my performance and my experiences are my own. PCs are very strange beasts, and one can run completely different from the other. There are plenty of benchmarks out there that support my conclusion, although there are a couple that do not. It's just the weird thing about it. I'm gonna go play something else now. We'll see you next time.